and welcome to Youth Views. This is Harry Khan streaming live on YouTube. I want to welcome first and foremost my guests. We have a regular on the show, Mr. John Cooper, also known as Cooperman 247.
Hello.
John, how are we doing this week, my friend?
You can call me Cooperman, but I'm fine. I went out campaigning for Stevenage Labour in Hertfordshire today, but very positive. Let's see, and Owen Guy Lucas Burnhammer is here.
Excellent. Yeah, Guy has just joined the stream as well. Before I introduce Guy, I want to introduce a brand new guest to the show, and his name is Tom. I believe Tom is 16 and he's from South Wales. How are you doing, Tom?
I've been good, thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us on Youth Views today. And last but not least, we've had, I could call Guy a regular to the show now. And Guy, I know you've been busy sort of at your Labour meeting as well tonight, and I want to thank you for giving us the time this evening. Welcome, Guy. How are we doing?
Well, thanks for having me on again. Yeah, we were selecting our parliamentary candidate in Hertfordshire today, so busy, but great.
Give us an update on that, Guy, before we get started. How's that gone?
Well, we've got an amazing candidate in. She's called Holly Calweiss, and she's been working with the CLP for a couple of months now. She was an internal candidate, so a members chosen candidate. She pretty much won unanimously, and we're looking forward to taking the fight to the Tories in Hertfordshire, definitely.
Let's see. It turns out I joined one day too late to vote for my MP.
Oh, one day.
Yeah.
They couldn't swing it for you, John.
No, sadly not. Rules are rules, sadly, even though they can be a bit bonkers at times.
And we're hearing all over the country that where there's mostly the right side of Labour, that the rules have been bent in every direction you can think of.
Possibly. I don't know that they've gained some candidates in London, but I heard that the left have gained quite a few outside, such as in Liverpool, and all that stuff. So who knows? So hopefully,
go on.
So hopefully it means that, let's see, regardless what happens next general election, we'll have enough left-wing candidates to nominate someone like Rebecca Long-Bailey or Laura Peacock if it comes to another leadership election.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's looking certainly good in terms of the Labour left candidates, but as I say, I'm hearing just again through the Twitter space that there are situations where certainly candidates who want to keep their seats are withholding some voting information and whatnot, and it's sounding a little bit fishy, but that's again, it's all rumours and nothing.
I'm hearing there's some voter ID going on in the area where Margaret Hodge is trying to get back to be as another MP for a different seat.
Absolutely. And
I don't know if hopefully she does not get back in. I can't stand her, and this is not because she's Jewish. Just to put into context, people.
Cooper, it's generally never because they're Jewish. That is a controversial subject, I think it's fair to say. But I'm glad you did clarify that anyway, just for the record.
Yeah.
Shall we get on with affairs as per our promotion and what we wanted to talk about this evening?
Yep.
So just to sort of recap for our viewers and anybody who is watching this live and watching this after we stream. Again, it's been quite a turbulent, topsy-turvy week in the world of UK politics. There was a massive build-up, wasn't there? And last week leading up to Cooper, I'm just feeling there's a little bit of feedback on your.
I'll just mute myself.
That would be great. Thank you. And so there was a sort of a great sort of big massive deal made of leading up to, and I believe that the papers have dubbed it Super Saturday as well, which is following the week of when Boris Johnson managed to secure a deal with the European Union and it was all supposed to be happening last Saturday, where he was supposed to bring the deal back to Parliament. Everybody was going to vote on it, and it was all going to move forward, and Brexit was going to happen before the 31st of October, as he has promised on, it's fair to say, more than one occasion. Anyway, the plotters, as they do, plotted, and they had tricks up their sleeve. And we remember from the Letwin Amendment, which was being talked about a little bit before Super Saturday. The Letwin Amendment was an amendment that was sort of brought in order to basically tell Boris, and it was successful in telling Boris that, look, we will talk about and debate the deal that you've gone and negotiated with the European Union, but actually we must vote on the wider legislation and other aspects of it first before we actually vote on the deal and officially leave the European Union. And that didn't really go down too well with with the government, Boris Johnson and his and cabinet, because the Letwin Amendment won with the numbers of 322 against 306. And what that actually meant was, as I say, is that a series of debates and voting would need to take place before actually anything in full would be ratified. So that's then what happened and took place. The trick up the sleeve from the government side of things then was that the programme motion, which again, it's a standard sort of aspect and part of the process with these kinds of things. But what isn't standard is the time that the government were giving Parliament to vote on this really, really important piece of legislation. It looked a bit of a cut and shut job because, as we will talk about in a few minutes with our guests, is the deal didn't appear to be the greatest deal in the world. In fact, it was dubbed a worse deal than Theresa May's deal. And yet, and Parliament voted that, and rightly so. I think it's fair to say that, how dare you, government, give us just 3 or 4 days to push this through, just so that you can get your Brexit through. This is going to affect generations to come, and subsequently they voted down and against the programme motion, and voted in favour of allowing more time to scrutinise this Brexit deal. And many on even the Remain side were saying, Mr. Grieve himself said, Dominic Grieve said that, look, I'm happy to vote for the deal, but actually we need to give it lots of scrutiny. Now, a cynic may say that the reason why Mr. Johnson became very unhappy with this is because the time that they were asking for may open the door, and probably would have done, for a number of amendments to be made to that particular deal, and maybe adding things like a customs union or a different version of Brexit, which may or may not have, a second referendum was being talked about, which may or may not have changed the deal in a manner which would have split the Conservative Party and almost changed the deal which had been agreed with the European Union. So what did Mr. Johnson do? He spat his dummy out, it seemed, and he didn't pull the Brexit deal, the Brexit agreement or motion, which many thought that he would, and in fact he himself threatened that he would pull it. He actually paused it and went back to the drawing room, came back out, coming all guns blazing for a general election. Now, as we know, and we've discussed on previous streams, Labour have said that, and because of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, this needs a certain number of votes before the general election is voted through and begins to take place. And Labour at this moment in time are not wanting for that to happen until no deal is technically or virtually, whichever, and we'll obviously talk about it in more detail, off the table. It's then obviously turned into a waiting game, because the European Union are delaying whether they will give us an extension, and we wait for that to happen. So let's start with our brand new guest, Tom, today. Tom, question. Let me just fire you a question. In the game of Leavers versus Remainers, those who may want to reverse or turn Brexit around, who do you think has got the upper hand at the moment, my friend?
Right. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Who has got the upper hand, Tom, on the Brexit debate at the moment? Who's winning? Are the Leavers winning or are the Remainers winning? Would you say, given the?
Well, I don't know. That's a difficult question. Like,
that's why I started with you.
Right, we can talk about European parliamentary elections where the Remain backing parties, well, seem to come out on top in terms of vote share. Not on amount of seats, but vote share at least. But then again, it just depends whether you count those who voted Labour as Remainers or not. But
I mean, given the recent sort of political climate here at the moment, what we're seeing here, Tom, isn't it? We're seeing that basically the so-called Remainers in Parliament are coming back with a number of amendments and a number of sort of voting down of certain things, and then you've got Boris coming back and the Conservative Party coming back and now calling for a general election. I mean, what do you think? A general election is the way forward then now?
Well, personally, of course, I want Labour to win a general election. So, ideally speaking, yes, I think a general election would be nice, but it'd have to be post-extension. But we'd also want Boris's deal, like you said, to be amended to the point where it would divide the Conservative Party in two. So we want the Conservative Party in their weakest position. We want Boris's support from the ERG completely wiped out, and also we want to then have an extension, which will obviously make things worse within the party. So then, if we were to have a general election, Labour probably won't dominate, but of course, with an extension, there's the risk of the Brexit Party, who may pick up some votes, and will probably, in the more marginal seats, Conservative seats, where they'd only just scrape in the constituency with a couple of votes, the Brexit Party could say divide in these areas, paving the way for Lib Dem or perhaps Labour seats. Anything that takes seats away from the Tories. So, in the event of a general election, I'm not sure that any party will come up with a majority. But I feel that if we have a general election after an extension and Boris's deal is amended, we could possibly get a minority Labour government, perhaps coalition with SNP. And I mean, Lib Dems are totally unpredictable at this stage. Hopefully, with the Lib Dems, if they swallow their pride there. But I'm hoping for a general election.
Okay, general election, dependent on whether Brexit happens before or after. I absolutely agree with you. Is going to be really relative to what happens in that general election. Cooper, what about yourself? Well, what's your view on this at the moment? I mean, I posed a question initially that if we're looking at this as a sort of Leavers versus Remainers kind of war, would you say at the moment that the Leavers are slightly shading it?
To be honest, we can have a referendum before an election. I don't think can work. There isn't the numbers for a referendum there, and whether or not the Remainers like it or not, the default option of leaving the EU is no deal. I mean, if a referendum could have passed, it would have done so in the indicative votes. I'm not really convinced it can now, since Boris Johnson does actually have a deal. Let's see, up, but no, so I could be wrong. Let's see, ideally, I'd want there to be an extension and then a general election so Labour can have a chance of, forming a government. Who they form a government with, Ideally, it'd probably have to be the SNPs, because I don't think Joe Swinson would ever work with Jeremy Corbyn. Maybe someone like Keir Starmer, but not Jeremy Corbyn. And if they had to rely on other parties, it'd have to be more of the other smaller parties, such as, let's see, Plaid Cymru, the Greens, and maybe
Okay.
other nationalist Northern Ireland parties if they get in.
If they do get in, absolutely.
For all we know, Sinn Féin could still get all the seats for the nationalists.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Guy, one thing that I wanted to touch on through my summary, which I probably forgot to do, was the manipulation of the Tory party sort of speakerphone, so to speak, at the moment. In the middle of the week, Mr. Johnson was selling this as almost a very contradictory sort of way of putting this. We voted, and it was, anyone who knows anything about this, it's just a second reading that had been pushed through. And the reason why that second reading had been voted through was it had to go through if there was going to be any amendments down the line, sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
But what it seemed like the government were doing is and we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later in the stream, in terms of how the government at this moment in time are using the less populist kind of machine type of politics. But why is it that Boris Johnson was telling in media outlets that we've got a deal through now, guys, it's through Parliament and it's voted down, yet on the other end he was saying, but they won't vote for the deal, or they won't let it go through, let it be debated through in the time that he wants? Well, what do you think that's about?
Yeah, well, I think you've summarised it pretty well. But in terms of what it's about, it's more lies and deception from Boris Johnson in a kind of a desperate attempt to win over people for this prospective general election that he thinks might get through tomorrow. As you rightfully said, the second reading was only passed so that amendments could be attached to it.
Yes.
It was shown that MPs didn't necessarily have to agree with the contents of the deal to do that. It just means they wanted to take it onto the committee stage, which would be the next stage after the second reading. Perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable that some Labour MPs chose to do that.
Yeah.
But then taking the votes of those, very good, strong Labour MPs and manipulating them to say that actually they'd voted through a Brexit deal was completely false. And then to say that Labour chose to delay Brexit is completely false as well. Because if Boris Johnson had sat down with Jeremy Corbyn and opposition leaders, they could have worked out a sensible timetable that would allow adequate scrutiny for that deal. But he doesn't want the deal to be scrutinised, because the more we find out about the deal, the more we find out about how much damage it was caused. So it's lies, deception, and desperation from Boris Johnson. As
and
ever,
he didn't he, Guy? Jeremy Corbyn, as soon as the programme motion had been defeated, he did offer, didn't he, to sort of sit down and talk about that, didn't he?
Yeah, he stood up and he offered almost a hand of friendship, saying, we want to sort this crisis out. We think that we should sit down, talk about a sensible programme motion that would enable enough scrutiny so that we could really see what this deal was about and what we could do to make it better for the people of our country. But we all know Boris Johnson is not interested in acting in the national interest. He just wants to do what will get him most votes and most power. And that's what we're seeing.
Guy, what is he scared of? Is he scared that the Parliament might attach something to that deal that may or may not split the Conservative? Because there's no way the ERG, for example, who are, for anybody who is new to this watching, the sort of extreme right side of the Eurosceptic side of the Conservative Party, is he afraid that anything attached through any amendments may split the party?
Yeah, I think he's definitely afraid of a sort of customs union amendment that would soften his Brexit and kind of remove the hardline element of his rhetoric, which would obviously split the Tory party. I think he's also very scared of scrutiny, because the more his deal is scrutinised, the more it's exposed that this deal is the most damaging deal he possibly could have got. He said to the DUP conference last year that he wouldn't do what he just did, which was create a border down the Irish Sea. So I think the more scrutiny that we get on Boris Johnson's deal, the more he's exposed for the liar, the shards, and the complete disingenuous nature of his actions. So he's scared of scrutiny. But yeah, as you said, also scared of splitting his party right down the middle with some sort of softer amendment like a customs union or a second referendum.
Yeah, because I think it's fair to say, and I'll open this up to anybody on the panel, that there's quite a lot of regret in the with many of these MPs for voting down Theresa May's deal. Do you feel that there's anybody out there in Parliament that wishes they had voted for Theresa May's deal?
I heard rumours the DUP regretted not voting for it.
Because this is a worse deal than Theresa May's. Let's not beat around the bush. I mean, do you want to, Cooper? Do you want to tell us a little bit about the workers' rights issue?
Well, I don't really know the full contents, but I think apparently, let's see, from the looks of it, I think Financial Times reported that that the workers' rights would be gone with the deal or something. I don't know. I need to find the tweet.
While you're looking at that, Cooper, I mean, I'll just tell you sort of what I've heard is that Theresa May's deal had a sort of guarantee. You know, at the moment, what in terms of our ceiling of workers' rights, because of our association and being within the European Union, that there is a sort of a ceiling, or whichever way you want to look at it, a height of workers' rights or a low end of workers' rights in which member nations can't exceed or decrease from. And it sounded like that Theresa May's deal, not that I read it, but certainly from what I've read around it, gave some guarantees around those rights. And this was one of the aspects that was in Boris Johnson's deal, which entire sections had been removed out. Yet we were hearing at the same time that when the government were questioned about this, they were given verbal assurances that actually, you know, again, using this kind of machine of populism, why should we have to rely on European ceilings? We should have better working rights. We'll make our own. But the problem is and anybody who has done a little bit of research in this, very, very well known commentators. I can see Cooper's just brought that up on screen, and I'll just add that that they've been quoted of wanting to eradicate workers' rights for a number of years, and we see this in what Cooper has showed us in a passage that could alarm Labour MPs who backed the Brexit bill. Leaked government document. Okay, there was a leaked government document that said basically that workers' rights and environmental protection commitments leaves room for interpretation. So I don't know if so we've got a second page on that as well. UK negotiators successfully resisted an inclusion of all UK-wide LPF rules, which were obviously previously there in Theresa May's deal, as I've said. And as Jenny Chapman from the Shadow Brexit Department saying, these documents confirm our worst fears. Boris Johnson's Brexit is a blueprint for. There's an excellent quote there that you brought up there, Cooper. And this is what we're going to be talking about today: deregulated economy, which will see vital rights and protections torn up. I.e., we're talking about starting again with these kinds of rights and standards. It's all about basically not just having, as it says there, a level playing field, which is with the European Union, but actually a lot more denigrated, a lot more starting from the bottom. Is there anything there, Guy, you want to say about that you've heard about at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose the basic idea that being in the European Union, we're obliged to keep up with certain standards on workers' rights. And without that guarantee, what could happen if we were to leave on the basis of this deal? Throughout that time after we've left, the Conservative Party, through legislation, would be able to drop below those standards. And that's what the Shadow Brexit Minister, Jenny Chapman, was on about, is the fact that we would end up with a deregulated economy because the Tories would be able to push through, quite frankly, whatever they would want to on workers' rights, because we'd be no longer obliged to meet those standards. So it is extremely concerning that he's dropped that. But I suppose true to his Tory values of exploit.
Oh, we've just lost the sound there, haven't we? Did we lose Guy? Have we lost Guy?
Yeah.
We lost Guy. I think we've got Guy back. Guy, I think we lost you there for a second, mate.
Yeah. Sorry, just a connection issue.
No problem. Sorry, carry on, mate.
But yeah, as I was saying, the kind of the idea behind dropping this workers' rights guarantee shows that Boris Johnson is staying true to his Tory values, which is going for an economy that doesn't protect workers' rights, doesn't protect working people. And quite frankly, he's been exposed on that issue as well. And as I was saying earlier, more scrutiny would expose this
and that's
kind of a bigger way. And it would,
absolutely, that's what the idea was, is in making sure everything gets passed and goes through within a week. That these things that we're talking about now would be on the subject matter for the debate, wouldn't it? So there would be people who would be trying to improve that deal. And obviously what we have is a fear that this level of deregulate. I think what Parliament trying to say is that you want to push through your Brexit, Boris, because you know that there's a public out there at the moment that want to get Brexit done, right? And then what you're using continuously is the rhetoric to basically lie and say, well, we've got the deal through now, but actually Parliament are wanting to take too long to debate the deal, and they actually will inevitably delay this. I mean, Tom, I want to bring you back in at this now. Why did Boris Johnson leave it so late to go and arrange a deal with the European Union? Because actually, if he'd have done this back in July, when he first came into the position of Prime Minister, wouldn't he be home and dry now with Brexit?
Well, see, I don't know if it's the same reasons why Theresa May did it, but it's likely to paint himself as a victim in a sense.
She was playing some delay as well. You're absolutely right. You reminded me of that. But, so what do you think? There was a bit of delay tactics going on there then?
No, because Theresa May tried to leave it really late in order to convince Parliament to back it to meet the deadline. But of course, they didn't. But I think where this one is, Boris is trying to paint himself as the victim. So now he's gone out and negotiated a deal. He's ready to leave on the 31st, but it's Parliament and all these Remainers that are blocking him. He's trying to make himself look like the victim, so he would probably pick up more votes in the general election. So he's taken like the kind of anti-establishment pose that Nigel Farage often tries to take, even though they're probably the most establishment buggers out there. He's trying to blame it on Parliament, effectively. He's trying to look like the victim, and that it's Parliament's fault that Brexit isn't happening, and it's all been hijacked by Remainers. But not really, because of course he's just forced Parliament into this position by leaving it so late. But of course the great British public don't follow this form of politics as we do, in a sense. So I suppose he's just
Tom, is there anything, sorry to interrupt, is there anything that when he first came in as Prime Minister, the delay, do you think there was anything that may have been actually, we don't want a deal here and we want to just leave without a deal, and actually I may be able to go ahead and get this done, push it through without a deal? Do you think there's any of that in that delay?
Well, yes. See, maybe that's what people were thinking at first, wasn't it? That he just wants a no deal. But then again, how will he get a no deal? He'll always need the consent of Parliament, won't he? And of course,
well, not technically, because if this is why the original ideas of proroguing had been everybody thought it was just a dream to start with, but it did happen, and then it happened. Then the Supreme Case Court came and whatnot, and I genuinely think what was the original plan was going to be to prorogue Parliament for long enough to leave no time to debate and use this public versus Parliament kind of argument to basically say, look, guys, we're going to leave with no deal now because we've got to get Brexit done by the 31st. I think this is all being pinned on that, but when it go on.
No, so but it's the same sort of thing, though. It all comes down to Parliament, though, because even if he didn't give them enough time to debate, after proroguing, they can. He never had the numbers in the first place, did he? He never had a majority. He didn't come into a fully functional majority.
No, he didn't.
And exactly. So if Parliament was then they weren't given enough time to debate. No. But they would have had enough time to at least vote on an extension. And even before he purged his party, there's no way people like Grieve especially would vote for no deal. Or wouldn't vote for an extension. So Parliament would still always have had that power to ask for an extension. And when it comes to no deal and extension, I really don't see the EU not granting it. So surely Boris must have known that he can't force a no deal without the consent of Parliament.
Yeah. No, look, it's we don't know what's going in the heads of these strategists and what we can all speculate. I mean, we and that's an excellent opinion. You're absolutely right that it could have been that. Now, next sort of subject I want to sort of bring in, and I actually, when I read this, I was internally quite happy that this was, because I think, as Thomas said a few minutes ago, the numbers are certainly not in the government's favour at the moment, especially after the purge of was it 21 or 22 MPs?
21.
21.
Tom, 21 MPs from the party. It's put the government in even more of a disadvantaged position. And there was talk of any of the amendments that might come through in terms of voting on a general election, because that's where we kind of are at the moment, that would include, and obviously this wouldn't be coming from the government side, but it would include the voting age of 16 and 17-year-old voters. And when I read this, and I heard something on the radio about this being sort of flirted with, I got quite happy, because I think in an election, that's a game changer. And I know, remind me, Guy, how old you are again, mate?
I'm 16.
You're 16, and so is Tom. So I just want to, would this be a game changer for you guys if the voting age was to be dropped?
Who's going first?
Any of you?
Tom, you can go for it, mate.
No, you can go on. I spoke last, didn't I?
All right, no problem. Lowering the voting age to 60 is something I'm extremely passionate about. You can probably have guessed my stance on that already, being a young Labour activist. But in terms of the stats behind it, what we know is that in 2017, 1.6 million 16 and 17-year-olds were denied the right to vote because the voting age hadn't been lowered yet. We already see the voting age lowered to 16 in some areas, such as Scotland, local elections, and I think they're working on it in Wales at the moment. But in terms of the practicalities behind lowering it, it makes complete sense, because we're in a situation at the moment. We've got the climate crisis threatening the existence of the earth.
Yeah.
We've got austerity ripping up our communities, and we've got Brexit polarizing our country, but young people can't have a say on that. And in terms of the hypocrisy behind not granting young people a vote, at 16 you can get a job, but you can't vote for a party who will strengthen your workers' rights and your wages. At 16 you can join the army, but you can't vote for a party that will give the army sufficient funding or give funding to those programs. At 16 you can get married and have kids, but you can't vote on a party that will strengthen child benefits. And at 16 you can book GP appointments, but you can't vote for a fairly funded NHS through a party. So the hypocrisy throughout this whole argument that 16-year-olds aren't educated or aren't responsible enough to vote is completely thrown out the window when you consider the rights and privileges we do have in society, like any other citizen. We know in the Tory leadership race, 16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote. And I think the reason the Tories don't want to lower the voting age to 16 is because young people will punish the Tories. And the Tories want to silence us, because we, as a group of 16 to 17-year-olds across the country, vote very highly in favour of opposition parties, because we see through the lies and we see through the damage. And the way of kind of solving the issue of young people not knowing enough is simple political democracy education lessons through independent and non-biased organisations being put through schools throughout the age of, say, 14 and 15, just telling people on the process of how to vote, how to read a manifesto and how to understand the system. But the Tories have chosen not to do this because they know that the more young people know, the more likely they are to lose seats and to lose votes.
I think, I tell you, you've covered a lot of what I was going to try and bring into next, Guy. But Tom, I mean, all right, there's a few points that Guy has made there. He says the Tories don't want us to vote. There's a plethora of reasons why 16, 17-year-olds should be able to vote, says Guy, because of the number of things that 16-year-olds can do at this moment in time. What's your view? Would you vote if you were given the vote at 16?
Oh God, yes, I vote. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely vote Labour, of course. Like personally, I'm in favour of it purely because of the advantage it gives Labour. Because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn has very high approval ratings among young people who were denied the vote, especially, and so it could come to our advantage. And of course, you often hear lots of baby boomers, especially like children, they're unwise, they haven't had experience. But to be honest, as Guy had said, we're old enough to do basically anything that we're old enough to work, we're old enough to pay taxes, we're old enough to have children, as you said. And so, I mean, don't we have the right to have a say in how our lives work? And also, I mean, to be honest, there's from my experience, as a 16-year-old, many 16-year-olds I know and have no interest in politics whatsoever. And to be honest, they're completely disengaged from it. They don't care. It's boring. There's this whole rhetoric around politics that it's still almost a class thing, because it's more the fact people are just like, it's boring. It doesn't matter. Like people don't not interested in it. But why? Well, why are people being disencouraged from politics? And they have been for decades and decades, and people are disencouraged. You're just fed lies by almost borderline propaganda from the tabloids. You see things like The Sun, and it's just utter crap, right? And so you could argue that there's no point in lowering the age because not many people will engage. But to be honest, if people don't vote, they don't vote. It still happens for those who are middle-aged or those who are even older. So for those who are passionate, like Guy and myself, then surely it just gives us the opportunity to engage more, right? Which can never really be a bad thing, because we always seek for higher turnouts in votes. But of course, like you said, there's always a hidden agenda to it. The Tories are going to be heavily against lowering the age because, well, ideologically speaking, they're social conservatives, aren't they? So any form of change, they're basically against. But it's not going to be in their favour because, as we said, Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party are very popular amongst young people, and the Tories utter disregard for, let's say, environmental issues also give them a very bad reputation, especially in working class areas. So yeah, I'd say definitely lower. Like in Wales, there's been lots of talk about it recently.
Yeah, what's the consensus out there, Tom, in Wales? Your circles.
Sorry, what? What did you say?
What's this census out in your circles? The young people that you associate with, people of similar age to you. Have you sort of ever mentioned that? Would you like to vote, or what's their opinions?
Generally, nobody cares. Like, of course, like so people I know, like personally, closely, like friends, and of course, by now I would have indoctrinated them into voting Labour. But generally speaking, people are just not interested, and they probably wouldn't vote. That's the thing.
So Cooper, what have the Tories got to be afraid of? Tom says most of the people he knows are not really interested in politics. I mean, I think we're a niche group here, no doubt. We are interested in politics. I ask yourself and myself last, Cooper, because we're slightly older than the two in this room.
Fair enough. Well, personally, I think young 17 to 16-year-olds should get the right to vote, since if they can pay their taxes and join the army, they have a right to vote in order to decide their future, since joining the army is a pretty big decision. Scotland, I think, allows 16-year-olds to vote in its local and Scottish Parliament elections.
Yeah. Maybe
referendum, I'm not sure. At least when it comes to independence, I'm not really sure. But let's see, but yeah.
Yeah.
As for why the Tories probably don't want 16, 17 years olds to vote, it's mainly because they'd probably lean more towards left-wing parties. I mean, look what happened when Labour got out the student vote last election. It took them a majority.
Yeah.
Probably a bit worried about that. Granted, I don't convinced that once all 16 to 7-year-olds are allowed the right to vote, not all of them will sign in because, like Thomas said, there's probably a lot that just don't give a dang about politics. It'd probably be more similar to what, the youth turnout for like 18 to 24-year-olds was in, either the EU referendum and 2015 election, which was around 30 to 40% of the vote, which is one. Leave one because the young people did not turn out to vote in the referendum. Granted, that slightly increased, I think, to 60% during 2017. Whether or not that will happen again, because as much as I hate to say it, Corbyn has sort of lost a bit of the youth vote.
And this is what I'm talking about. How real do you think that is, John?
I think it's been exaggerated. Yeah. But it would be foolish to deny that there has been a bit of decline in Labour support. But only because of just the whole, mainly because of the whole Brexit entrenchment and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, nobody truly knows, you see, because these are things that we hear on the mainstream media. We hear about polls, don't we? And we have seen these labels of certain number of young people would vote if this happened in that, but we don't really know who they're polling. We don't know. I'll give you an example. So, you've got question time audiences, right? And you sometimes watch question time and you think, gosh, for a northern town, that's got quite a right-wing opinion base in some of their answers and the way they're clapping, etc., etc. And then you only have to go onto Twitter the next day or a couple of days later, and then basically you find out that what Question Time have done is just planted a load of Tory, like a Tory councillor, and there was a picture of a Tory councillor that had come up in South Shields Tory constabulary down the road or something like that. And so I think we've got to be sceptical about what the polls are telling us and what the media is telling us. And I think where I would like to sort of draw our attention in this conversation is a little bit about when Guy spoke, really, is that the Tories have been making it difficult, not just for young people to vote, but literally anybody to vote. Because what we do know is that statistically, when there are lower turnouts in election, and again, you have to think about why is he calling for a December election? You may think that at the time of year when we're preparing for Christmas and whatnot, voter turnout might be low. But as I was saying, the point is that when voter turnout is low, the Tories tend to do better. We have also the introduction, guys, of registering to vote. We have the introduction of now potentially voter ID being asked for when we go to the polling station. So I ask you again, Cooper, is this another method of suppressing voting and keeping the numbers as low as physically possible?
Possibly. After all, the Conservatives, from 1992 to 2015, in the 18 years during that time, in which 13 years they were out of government and 5 years in. It took them 18 years to form a very slim majority compared to what they used to get during the years of Thatcher and Major, which, to be honest, So it's very possible that they're a bit worried that if more people turn out to vote, the more they won't be able to form majorities, and not to mention over the last 9 years they've nearly alienated every potential ally they could get in an election to form any form of coalition or minority government with, since they've just about alienated the DUP now, and the Lib Dems got screwed over in the coalition years.
Yeah. Final question on this, on the voting age. Back to Guy, please. What about the Lib Dems? Let's just say 16, 17-year-olds get to vote. Again, through polling and through what we're hearing in the media, that young people are more leaning towards them. Sorry, Cooper, can we just have your
Sure.
that feedback? Thank you, mate. We know that, or at least we're told that we know that many young people are leaning towards a Remain. I feel that from certainly the individuals that I talk to who are of a young demographic. If voters were given the voting age was reduced to 16 and 17-year-olds, is that going to help mostly Labour, do you think, or are the Lib Dems going to get a bit of a surge out of this?
I mean, of course, there's a slight concern that maybe encouraging younger votes would kind of boost the Lib Dems in a way. But I think if Labour get the message across right, exposing the damage the Lib Dems did in the coalition with the Tories between 2010 and 2015 and bringing about the widespread misery and cuts to our public services, then the Lib Dems really don't stand a chance electorally. So, but I think Labour are different to the Tories. We want the voting age lowered to 16, not because it would benefit us, but because it is fair and it is democratic that people of an age in which they are still they are informed enough and they know enough and they have enough responsibilities in society to deserve a vote, like we touched on, getting a job, joining the army, paying taxes, etc. We want to lower the voting age because it's transparent and it's fair, not because it would just benefit us. And if it does end up benefiting the Lib Dems, it would be a shame if it did, but so be it. At least we've increased democracy and at least we've made our voting system fairer and more transparent.
Absolutely. I mean, look, here's where I stand. I absolutely agree with that. And I must say, if the voting age is reduced to 16 and 70-year-olds, I think the Tories are annihilated. They're annihilated because I think regardless of where they will vote, be it the Liberal Democrats, be it for Labour, and I think actually, as Guy says, I think a majority of those young voters will lean towards Labour, and not just because of the Jeremy Corbyn project, but actually there are policies that Labour are offering that are attached more to young people than any other party are offering. You know, for example, the living wage, the equal wage for 16-year-olds. Now we know the Tories are talking about that, but that's not until 2050 or something like that, you know, but certainly a few years to come. So I absolutely think that we need to bring in the point here that our policies are more appealing to young people. And I think that's an ever better reason to vote. I think the Lib Dems, the only policy that I have any awareness of them is stopping Brexit. And I think most young people who have some interest in politics or vote because their families do, or vote because they want to find out a little bit more in shaping their future, are probably a little bit more sensible in looking at things democratically and looking at Labour's policy of saying, well, actually, what we want to do is we want to give the people a choice again, and that is through a second referendum and do it democratically. And so I think that most of that vote portion, I personally think, will go towards Labour. And we have the invidious there, as you see on screen, saying Lib Dems are just Remaining Conservatives. Change my mind. It's certainly an opinion that you're entitled to, invidious. So, I mean, just before we wrap this up, in terms of the 16-year-old voters, what, Tom, you're a bit of an activist. What are you doing? Let's just say next week in Parliament, this goes through, the mechanics of this being attached to a general, because you know it's very possible, because we are living in these kinds of times where anything can happen. Let's say that goes through. What can we here as Youth Views, what can you as a group, as individuals, do to start now going out, and not just obviously with you as you normally would? Tom, what would you do? What would your strategy be doing to try and influence more people towards voting? Not necessarily voting Labour, because I'm sure that's what you would want, but at least sort of encouraging them in Labour. What would your in terms of voting, what would your strategy be, mate?
Or and they encouraging people to vote. Oh,
Yes,
I am.
young people to vote.
Young people.
Yeah. How can you sell it to them? If you want, I can ask some of the others and come back to you if you want while you're thinking about that, Tom.
To be honest, I think that's it's a bit of a hopeless cause, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like so we young people. I'm still in I'm still in high school. Yeah, I'm year 11.
Yeah.
I do my GCSEs, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and if I was to encourage people, say in my local
Yeah.
school, to get into
Yeah.
politics, I honestly can't think of more. My entire year group now, yeah, I can't think of more than 7 people who would be willing to actually get involved. It is generally that grim, the amount of interest. And honestly, I'm not just saying this like because I know basically everybody in my year group, and I can only say about 7 would probably get
Yeah.
involved. And it's not like
Okay,
you can
get
do
involved.
people
Tom
are
got
just
involved.
genuinely not interested.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. You're saying they would maybe not get involved, but would they vote? I mean, or is that the same thing for you?
No, they wouldn't vote. No.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. There's a lot. So okay, so all right.
I think it would take time for, let's see, a huge number of 16 to 17-year-olds to get an interest in voting politics. It might not be high turnout at first, but given time and more encouragement and stuff, they could end up voting. But at the moment, I don't expect it to be over 50%. I expect it to be around 30 or 40% of the vote.
Okay.
Which we'll have to see.
It's not encouraged at all here. Not at all.
That's fair enough. And that, but Cooperman scenario, you're on the doorstep and somebody who's 16 opens a door to you, right? And you say, I'm from the Labour Party or I'm from the Lib Dems, whatever, and he or she says to you, sorry, mate, not really interested in politics. I'm not going to vote. I want to know, what's your strap line? What's your line to try and encourage them to actually even consider voting?
Let's see. You've been given the chance to vote. This is your chance to make a difference. Let's see. The policy. Let's see. This is a chance to get a government that could represent you. Let's see. Make your life even better, even if it's by a little bit. You have to make. Let's see, and you can have your voice heard for the first time.
Absolutely.
In generations.
Yeah.
Okay, can I come over there?
Go on, Tom.
I think probably the best strat would probably be tell them that they're losing something by not voting. Tell them that they could gain something personally. And I know it sounds bad, but what I find a lot of 16-year-olds is try and make it seem like they can actually gain something from voting. Hit them with a statistic about how they're being denied something. Give them something hopeful first.
I think that's an excellent point, Tom. That's why this is my view. I think that's why most people vote, because there is something in it for them and their community, and their family.
Yeah. Unfortunately, collective interest is not really that common anymore. But
you're right.
Appeal to them personally, and you might begin somewhere.
Fair enough. No, a great point, and thank you for the Cooperman for adding his points. Guy, what about yourself? On the doorstep, 16-year-old male, mate. You've just stopped me. I was playing my FIFA on the PlayStation. What do you want? Right.
I think the reason
my time, Guy, to try and explain.
I'd start by asking this person, what do you care about? What is it that you have an interest in? And it can be the smallest of things that stimulates a conversation that may get them involved in politics. Maybe they know about some local knife crime incidents and they're concerned about their safety. Maybe their parents have had their benefits cuts and they want their parents to have a fairer wage and fairer working environment. Maybe they know a bit about climate change and they understand that action needs to be taken. But one thing or another, however minor or major, we need to empower young people and make sure they know their voice can be heard, because we live in a society where I think young people are scared of politics because they're constantly told that they don't have a voice and that only the elite and the powerful are the people that can make a change. But young people do have a voice and they do have power. You alone may not be able to change things massively, but when you come together with other people and we work as a collective movement, the capability for change, the sky is the limit. There is nothing that can stop you if you get involved with a strong local group or a powerful local group of people in terms of making change. But again, it's about seeing what people care about, seeing what people regard as their concerns in society, because we've got to make young people, got to give young people access to politics. We need a route in for young people, whether that's an issue in terms of knife crime, an issue in terms of investment in youth services, many issues that you can touch on. Give them a purpose and give them a reason to get involved. And I think it can work. I think, as John may have touched on it, it will be a process. It will take a long time. And the people who have absolutely no interest in whatsoever, it's a project in terms of getting them involved. But kind of day by day, one by one, you have these conversations on the doorstep, you get people interested, they start to see these kind of things on the news, and they start to understand that there is a role for them.
I think that's really, really well put. And I bet you're amazing out there on the doorstep. You are, Guy, when you're out there campaigning for your local party.
I do love a good door knocking session.
Do you like a good debate? Do you?
Yeah, I've had many a few debate on the doorstep, but it's all about winning the arguments, persuading people, understanding where people are coming from, but telling them why the Labour Party, obviously my party of choice, is the party for them. And as I say, there's so many issues we can talk about with a variety of people, and it's just about finding something that someone cares about and telling them why exactly the Labour Party are the party for them in terms of that issue. It's about those personal connections and getting in contact.
I think just the way you've delivered that is so succinctly and brilliantly put. Okay, guys, because I'm just conscious of time and we didn't really want to go too much past an hour. I think if we can get to sort of spend the sort of next 7 or 8 minutes before we sort of wrap up, what I wanted to sort of bring in terms of the next subject matter. I think we all know that there's a general election coming, and I think that could be this side of the new year, or it could be the other side of the new year. So what we have heard, certainly in the media in the last few days, is that, or the last few weeks rather, is that Labour is ready and wants to go for a general election, but they want for no deal to be taken off the table. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean necessarily they're waiting for the European Union to give the United Kingdom an extension and that should automatically take no deal off? Or are they looking for Parliament to actually come up with something that officially takes no deal off the table forever? Is it even possible? Who knows? We then have heard over the last few evenings that there's a bit of an internal row within the Labour Party in terms of whether they want a general election or not. Some people, some of the Parliamentary Labour Party are talking about being scared of the polling at the moment. I know we've had a conversation about the polling earlier and how realistic that is, what the intentions of polling actually is. Does it shape opinion or does it reflect opinion? And those certainly can be brought into our debates in the final point of this show tonight. Is it the disliking for Jeremy Corbyn and actually the very true realistic chance of him becoming Prime Minister and having the keys to number 10? Are many of his colleagues who dislike him and are opposed to him wanting him to not become Prime Minister? Is that the reason why the Labour Party has been split over this issue? Or is it this issue of Brexit? Is there a belief that people within the party, the Labour Party, think that there's the numbers within Parliament to have a second referendum? So is it about strategy? Is it about actually, I think we can get a referendum first, they'll vote Remain, and then this will be all behind us, and then we can move forward and debate the real legitimate issues? Not saying that Brexit isn't a real issue, but in some minds, some people think that it is has been a bit of a waste of time, so to speak. So I open this up to anybody who wants to go first on this. Is that what should Labour do next, and how do they overcome this division of opinion within the Labour Party? Cooper, should we come to you first then, mate? Because I'm conscious that I spoke to the other two.
Sorry, can I just say I'm going to dash now. Sorry, I got to go.
Oh, okay. All right. Listen, thanks for joining us, though, Tom. All right. See you on the next one.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I think Labour should go for a general election when an extension happens, because the longer they delay, the more they look scared and all that stuff. Granted, I think there are some in Labour that think, if we delay long enough, we possibly can get enough chance to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn and replace him with someone actual political beliefs. Because I believe there was, I think Lewis Goodwell tweeted that apparently there's like this human rights investigation or about racism in Labour that's coming up in January, and they think it might be enough evidence to possibly they'll be able to investigate enough incidents to conclude that Corbyn is anti-Semitic or something, or has allowed anti-Semitism to flow through the party and all that, which would force him to resign or something like that. Some just don't think Labour can win at all, so they just why delay the inevitable, all that stuff. Some seem to think that they can stop, but a second referendum could be done through Parliament, which I've said earlier. The default option, if we don't get a deal through, or a ref or a general election or something like that, is that no deal will be the default option, regardless of what Remainers want. You have to an agreement. The only way to stop a no deal, really, is to have either a deal passed or possibly a referendum, but the numbers are not there. That's been shown very clearly, or have a general election. And I think that has shown, there's some polling that has shown, mostly from Comres, but take it as a bit of salt, if you will, that if extension and a general election called during the extension, Labour has a very good chance of becoming the largest party. I think they're 1 point lead in one of their polling, or something like that. It'll be a very tight election. They could still very much lose it, but having a general election is probably the best chance Labour has at the moment in order to get their sort of referendum, their sort of deal given to the people, and choose between, and then focus on what the domestic policies they want to do after the result. But yes.
So Cooper, what do you think? If you were a betting man, what would you predict will happen next in terms of Labour agreeing to a general election? Do you think we're looking at one in December?
I think it's 50-50. I mean, if this SNP Lib Dem thing goes through, I think Labour would, whether or not they would like it or not, they'd probably have no choice but to go for the election, because they can't look like cowards, it or not. You can't look scared. You need to show that you think you can win an election. I mean, after all, if the Labour rejected the election in 2017, they would look like cowards, and it would probably only further strengthen May's thing at the time.
Cooper, you've just mentioned the SNP Lib Dem thing for our viewers. Do you want to just talk about that for a second in terms of?
My understanding, they want an amendment which has a general. That shortens the majority you need for a general election. I think 344.
Yeah.
But on the condition that an election is held on Monday the 9th of December. Yeah. I think this was mainly done so that young people and students would still be in their colleges and universities at the time, or something like that. Apparently, the Conservatives don't really want to go for it. I'm not sure if this thing will pass or fail. It seems to likely fail, but yeah.
But many are calling that a stunt, I believe.
Yes.
Why would they be calling it a stunt?
I haven't really followed some of the reactions particularly strongly, though. Some might be accusing it of the Lib Dems trying to sabotage Labour. Some of the Tories might be accusing it of trying to sabotage, their dealing or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. That's all I know, really. But yeah.
No, that's fair enough. And so, Guy, Cooper talks about polls, he talks about a series of reasons. I think it's fair to say that with a 25-point lead Theresa May had over Corbyn in 2017, that we have to take polls with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think? Do you think now's the time for Labour to endorse this general election?
Well, there's obviously the motion tomorrow, the Fixed Term Parliament Act, as to whether we should vote for a general election or not. And I think it requires 2/3 of the House. But the reason Labour won't vote for it tomorrow, and I too agree that they shouldn't vote for it, is because it's a way of Boris Johnson creating a smokescreen in front of his failure of being able to deliver a deal. Yes, it passed the second reading, but he has not delivered Brexit by October the 31st, and that is the only ticket he's riding. And he said he'd rather be seen dead in a ditch than request an extension, and he's had to request an extension. I think the reason he wants a general election called at this time is to kind of throw that in front of the fact that he's failed that 31st deadline. So for me, electorally, the best strategy for Labour is to refuse the vote tomorrow and say we're not having it. We believe there should be a general election, but we're not having it on these terms at the moment, so that we get that extension and we get past October the 31st still in the European Union. Because as John said, believe it or not, there has been some polling. I know there's a bit of speculation as to whether we should believe it or not. That says if there's been an extension following the 31st and we're still in the EU, Labour are more likely to win. And then at that point is where Labour stands up and says, right, now we're ready for the general election. And we will decide the date, because we also can't trust Boris Johnson to decide a date, because he will have asked Dominic Cummings or other advisors which date is kind of the most likely to rule out as many Labour voters as possible. We can't trust him to choose the date, which is I think is kind of the motive behind the Lib Dems and SNP move. But I think what the Lib Dems and the SNP are failing to realise is this whole general election facade is to throw a smokescreen in front of the fact that he's failed to deliver Brexit by October the 31st, which is the only ticket his career is riding on.
So can I just say that when it was fulfilled that Labour were not really calling the election, let's see, a few days ago, many of the people in my Twitter chat group were very furious with Labour, and I heard a story from one of my friends from there that his grandfather, a long-time Labour voter in a place like Portsmouth South, is not going to be voting Labour and instead for Independent, and this is a problem. The longer Labour delays, the more it alienates many of its long-time voters, and they might end up voting, let's see, Independents. And this is a really big problem for particularly marginal seats, which we're going to need to keep in order to win.
No, I mean you go on, guys. Sorry,
yeah. Well, that is frustrating to hear, and obviously that's extremely concerning. But it's really a choice for us. If we give Boris Johnson his election on his terms on the 12th of December, there's a very, very good chance, with polling at the moment, with public opinion at the moment, that he will win a majority. So a bit of delay and a bit of damage is probably much less than the damage of another 5 years of a Boris Johnson government.
Well, Guy, if he goes into that election having delivered Brexit, he's a hero then, isn't he? Surely.
Well, he will be going into that election telling the people that Parliament has stopped him through its deal. So all you need to do is vote for me just so I have the numbers to get it through. Whereas if we allow this extension, we allow time to go on a little bit, we move past that, and he can no longer say that he did everything he could.
Yeah, but there's been talks that Labour won't even call an election even when we get an extension. That also might end up being a problem.
That's interesting.
Then I disagree with the position, because I think we do need one eventually, but just as we move past this 31st date, which is so crucial in kind of getting rid of the main Boris Johnson supporters, because they're all hanging on to the 31st.
I think that's where I stand. And just to sort of touch on the point that Cooper has made, is that we are hearing this evening that there are rumours that an EU extension will be agreed up until the 31st of January. There's a proviso within that extension that should a deal be agreed within Parliament, then we could leave the European Union sooner than that, so sort of New Year's Day or something like that. So I think that's pretty smart from the European Union, because I think it's fair to say we've pissed them around enough, haven't we? And I think that if I think for us, in terms of the side of the fence that we're on, in terms of wanting a Labour government in, I think this is all about now how it looks to the public. And now Boris Johnson has a chance to get his deal through, and he has the time to get it through. And I do think that time now needs to be given on the timetable to debate and attach anything that needs to be attached to that deal in order to make it worthy of voting through the House of Commons. Now, if that happens, it will be very bad that Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings and co. turning upon their own deal, because actually this so-called public that are talking about get Brexit done now, this is filling our heads up and it's frustrating us, that actually when the media outlets are reporting the day after that actually there was a majority that was voted through in the House of Commons, yet it was pulled by the government, that's not going to go down well. But in terms of a general election, I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to side absolutely with Guy on this one, that any more delay on this is going to make Labour look like they're scared. And one thing that Labour aren't is they're not scared of a general election, and nor should there be, because the Tories, in my view, are scared of the campaign that Jeremy Corbyn and his crew, his leadership group will carry out. I think it's nothing short of historical, the vote share and the points that they gained in the 2017 election. And I think there is absolutely no reason why they can't do that again. So I think my view on this is, and I would agree with Guy on this, is that if that extension is agreed upon and endorsed, I think then we should be going for a general election come what may. And when I say that as long as that general election is in December, let's say, for example, a day in December, I don't think there should be any more dithering on this. I think the Labour Party leadership team should three-line whip this and have everybody voting in favour of general election. And those who don't, I think this is time now for the party to start getting a little bit tough, because this is about the future now of the party, and it's about the future of the government in this country and bringing real change for ordinary people out there in society. I think if there are people that try and vote this down and don't and basically break the whip, then I think it needs to be made very clear. A similar purge to what Boris Johnson did. Look, he's done it and got away with it, but he's really talking about it now. I think that they need to be told that should you vote against a general election and hinder our chances of winning a general election or even going for one, I think they should be saying to them that you will not be allowed to stand in the next general election and that you will be replaced by a new candidate. I think it's time to get tough on those ones who are trying to chicken coup over Jeremy Corbyn again. And that's my sort of final view on this. Cooper, last thoughts from you before we go, my friend?
Last thoughts on what, just anything, or?
Yeah, before we go, what's going to happen next week or moving forward? What's going to happen next week in politics?
50-50 chance of general election, I'd say. I'm not sure what. Likely no election is called, but let's see. But probably more Brexit entrenchment, a bit more chaos. Possibly it could be like last week where nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Lots has changed, but nothing has changed.
Pretty much.
Excellent.
This is a zombie parliament we're dealing with.
Exactly. And let's face it, that they need to give us enough material to jump onto Youth Views and do a live stream, don't they, Guy?
I think Youth Views should be made a national campaign platform for Labour. Would be brilliant. Yeah,
I think so. Well, what I was going to say earlier is that you got 1 million people on the street campaigning for a second referendum last weekend. Why don't we have 1 million people on the street campaigning for the voting age to be dropped to 16, 17-year-olds? I mean, that's a more worthy cause in my view, I think. So let's hope we can fly the flag for something like that. Final thoughts from you, Guy. What do you think is going to happen next week, and what do you think should happen?
Well, on a more general point, we've got to be honest with us. excuse me, we've got to be honest with ourselves. In terms of kind of Labour Party coming to consensus on things, hell will freeze over before our party unanimously agrees on major issues, because we are a broad church and we are a party that accepts a variety of opinion, and that's what's so good about the Labour Party. But what we are united on is that we've got very, very strong policies that will benefit the many and not the few. We've got strong policies to tackle the climate crisis, to reverse 10 years of damaging austerity. We're the only party with a sensible policy on Brexit. I think regardless of what happens in the next few weeks, whether we end up with this December election, whether we end up with an election maybe further on in the extension period, maybe January or February, all I know is that despite divisions in the Labour Party, we will come together united on our policy fronts to win a general election for the people of this country, and we'll have a people-powered government making the change that is so desperately needed in this society. And I make my wholehearted commitment to campaigning at every hour and second possible I have, if that.
Yeah, can't wait to get out there, Guy. And I tell you something, we should link up at some point and start in terms of growing this movement. I think what we should start doing is we should start going to the streets and talking and filming people and their views and encouraging them to get more involved in politics, because I think in terms of certainly younger generations, that is how we're going to grow the movement, really. So I think, off camera, we should certainly talk about how we can enhance things in that respect. Okay, listen, guys, I want to thank everyone. I know we said an hour and we've gone over a little bit over an hour, but I want to thank all of our viewers who have been listening tonight and tuned in. Want to sort of thank our guests for coming on. Special thanks to Cooperman and Guy and Tom, who left us a little bit earlier. But more than anything, what we want to do is we want to try and grow this movement. And as we have been talking about voting age being lowered to the 16 and 70-year-olds, we need to go out and push this a little bit more. Disappointing to hear people like Tom talk about none of my friends are interested, but I think Guy touched on some of the real true issues in terms of what personally affects us as a means of trying to encourage more young people towards politics. Listen, guys, I've been Harry Khan. Look forward to speaking to you hopefully next week with a plethora of further material that we can use to sort of break down and tell truth about, not like the mainstream media does and some of these polling companies. Listen, keep it real, guys. See you all real soon. Hold tight. I've been Harry Khan. Take care and God bless.